Well, hey there. Welcome to Conversations in Color here at Shift Cyclery and Coffee Bar, our venue. My name is Ed Hudgens, and we just finished an incredible conversation with Dr. Frank Watkins and Dr. Salika Ducksworth-Lawton from the university here in Eau Claire. We had things we planned to talk about that we never even touched because the conversation was just rolling, and it was good, it was encouraging, it was challenging. We talked about the Superbowl halftime performance by Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and the folks who performed with them, and what that meant and what it didn't mean, and we from that point talked about a lot of things related to that, and it was really good, and I'm excited for you to jump in and listen to it. But before you do, I want to mention first of all our great sponsors that without these folks there would be no Conversations in Color. Again, Shift Cyclery and Coffee Bar, Converge Radio 101.9, the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire, and Pablo Center at the Confluence. The partnership is just vital to this operation, so thanks to those sponsors. Also want to mention our conversation today, as all of our conversations are grounded in three main pillars, and that's honesty, humility, and humanity. We're going to have real conversations. We're going to lean in on the hard stuff. We're going to recognize that none of us knows everything about anything, and we're going to speak to each other respectfully and recognize the inherent value in each person. That's how this conversation went. That's how we are determined to have every conversation here happen at Conversations in Color. And I would encourage you, as you're having conversations about hard things, to maybe think about instituting those pillars for yourself in your conversations. Well, with no further ado, welcome in. I invite you into the conversation. Well, I'm just excited. It's the first time I've had a chance to sit with Frank Watkins, and you've been at the university, you said, for about 8 years now?
8 years, yeah.
So and you work with music, and we'll dive deeper into all that here in a little bit. Always happy to sit with my sister Salika. Whenever we can get together and cause a little trouble, it's a good day.
Good trouble, always good trouble.
Always well, I hope so. As is normally the case with this show, before the camera is even rolling, we are talking about substantial things, and we have to catch ourselves and say, wait, let's save that, because that's good stuff. So we got ideas about talking about some Black History Month and the importance of that, and talking about Black musicians and the importance of Black music in the American music world and experience. And a great place to start with that is the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And the halftime show that had Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Eminem and Kendrick Lamar and 50 Cent and Mary J. Blige. And I had to get all the rappers out first because that was my priority. Then I got to Ms. Blige.
The Queen.
The Queen.
We cannot ignore the Queen.
No, she was magnificent.
She's great.
So what did y'all think about the halftime show?
I mean, it was great. I was amazed at the number of my students referencing it on Monday. So it was a far broader halftime show, I think, than the media has made it out. A lot of national media is making it sound like it's this narrow slice of Gen X doing it. I mean, the joke I keep seeing is, that was the halftime show when you saw what your parents really were. But no, I mean, it was a large swath of America loved that show. And then you have this very small, very vocal, everything has to be about them, losing their minds, going, worst show ever. And I'm looking at it, you know, when it's country music and a lot of us are not watching it, we don't go up to rain on people's parades.
Yep.
Why was it so important for that crew to come out in the comments section and center themselves as if they were the only standard of musical taste and everything had to cater to them?
Well, of course we can speculate about what might be behind these things.
Right. You know, I think I find myself in the middle of those two camps. I don't watch the NFL because Kaepernick is still out of a job, and I think that the NFL is still a problematic space. We really haven't recognized the contributions of African Americans in that space and in that sport, in that field. And then I think about the Super Bowl. I mean, are we really going to center this rap and this gang culture, the Crip Walk and things of that sort? I love those artists, don't get me wrong. I love everything about them. But is it just a nod to Black America to say, here, we won't give Kaepernick a job, but here's a Super Bowl with some gang culture on front and center, and here you go, and then we're done. I just have a problem with that still. I think that we can go so much further and do much more, do better than what we saw there. But all that to say, I love those artists. I do love those artists, but I still think that the NFL is still super problematic to me.
Yeah.
And there's more that can be done with them.
I will say that I didn't watch the game. Yeah. I watched the performance on YouTube.
Yeah,
afterwards.
I did too.
Because I did not want to give the NFL revenue.
Right.
And I'm still angry with them about Kaepernick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that whole thing that you just brought up about this being performative is really important. Now I throw it to Ed.
Very performative.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So one of the takes I've heard recently has been that, they didn't choose more current, aside from Kendrick Lamar, they didn't choose a more current crew to do this. And part of it was kind of saying, okay, we recognize this hasn't been a part of our halftime shows forever. Let's take something that has historical significance in this genre, in this culture of music, and plant it there. But there's a part of me, it's like, why didn't you go back to like the late 70s, early 80s? Why didn't you pull in some, I know Run DMC with Jam Master Jay, he's gone, but the other two guys are still there. Bring in Run DMC, Houdini, LL Cool J, Sugar Hill Gang.
Yes.
Any of those folks that were real pioneers for rap music in America, like that would have been something.
But you notice the people who they brought in came in after rap music, after Sugar Hill, after Island Records, etc., were bought out by the majors. They didn't have any of the true old heads from when it was still independent music.
Right.
So that had more to do with Dr. Dre making those contracts than I think really wanting a sense of history and a sense of nostalgia. Mm-hmm. But I also think for the group that they're aiming at, which are those people who, they come of age in like 1984 to 1996.
Yeah.
They got right in the middle. I mean, I was already an adult when this happened. And for my generation, it would have been Public Enemy.
Yeah.
But I can still appreciate this group. Mm-hmm. They're a little bit past New Jack Swing. They're when hip hop really dominated the radio. But I also think, to get to what Frank was talking about too, they don't challenge expectations.
Right.
If you put, say, Houdini out there, or one of the song Self-Destruction, mm-hmm. that would be something that I think the same people who are clutching their pearls and waving their canes and going, yes, it took me a self-destruction of America, they still would have objected.
Right.
But I don't think the mainstream white audience would have known that music. I don't think they would have known. My students don't know that Public Enemy and The Clash did a combination, Bring the Noise.
Or Anthrax.
Anthrax, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They did something with The Clash. I'm sorry, it was in the late 70s, and I forgot the name of that song. But they don't know that because it wasn't mainstream in the white community.
Yeah.
Until 92, 93, 94.
Right.
So I think that what they did was they chose the ones that the white community would know, and they figured Black people would come along.
I guess my question is, but what did that accomplish? I mean, we have Kaepernick, Kaepernick's an issue. We have this whole thing with Brian Flores and the NFL players who are getting concussed and all this that's going on. What did that halftime performance accomplish? How did that move the needle at all? And did it move the needle at all? And if not, then was it performative? Is my overall question. I feel like there could have been more done in a more systemic way to make change than giving just a nod to Black America. Like, here's some celebration of gang culture. There you go, and enjoy it.
I think that they were out to make money.
Well,
They were out to make money and make it in the least, how do I put it? It was laziness in that way. Because to the songs that you're referring to, like Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, the message, if those, I don't know what to call them, if those small town assimilative culture first, don't give us no gangster rap, people had heard self-destruction or the message or anything from Africa Bambaataa or Public Enemy, they would have had a bigger cow because those were critiques of America.
Right.
The message talking about people dying in the street from homelessness and police brutality or cop killer. You notice they didn't have that guy out there.
Ice-T wasn't out there.
He wasn't out there in
I thought about
'96. That was the song.
Yes.
But I still remember being at RAND in a meeting, and we had an assistant secretary of state there. And no, it was '95. And we were discussing why what they called high quality Black youth, which were the ones with the best scores on the ASVAB, et cetera, they were seeing a decline in the number applying to be officers. And we were talking about why that was happening. And I said, because you have a different culture. And one of the white men in there, of course, he's like, what? And I said, we have a rap music culture. We have this different culture, and it's a critique, and it's not as open. And we also have more avenues. And of course, somebody tried to rap at that moment. Because I referenced Cop Killer as a example of that. And so, if you're 65 or older, don't rap. But what shocked me was to see my words 2 days later, not attributed to me, but attributed to somebody else in the New York Times. And I got congratulations because they're like, oh, good, you've been jacked. So, but it's, this is it's the performative coon culture that the record companies know how to market and they know how to position. When we do the social consciousness, the positivity, they don't know how to market it. They are so caught in this archetype marketing. They don't know what to do with Lil Nas X. They don't know what to do with Janae Monáe. They don't know what to do with these artists. Those artists break through in spite of the record companies and radio, not because of them.
But it's not a problem, though, because we support those artists.
We don't have to. But all right, when does it become we punish? Well, these artists, this is where hip hop beyond beats and rhymes. And if you haven't seen that video, go out, it's on the web, just look at it. Hip hop beyond beats and rhymes. And he does an interview with aspiring rappers at one of the big hip hop conferences. And they were saying, well, yeah, I can spit social consciousness rhymes, but nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
And they're talking to, I can't remember the woman who was the founder of Def Jam Records, Sylvia, I just lost her name, and I see her face in front of my face.
Right.
And she was saying, yeah, when we controlled it, it was positive. When we controlled it, it put an emphasis on education, it put an emphasis on doing the right thing. But all of them were bought. 1993 to 1994. And that's when the music changed. And I looked, and I do remember because I was in grad school and I was teaching these young kids through OSU's Young Scholars Program. And it was 92. And all of a sudden, what we were hearing on the radio was NWA and songs with B and hoes in it. And we're trying to tell these 12, 13, 14-year-olds, don't sing that. That's degrading women. Don't do that. That's degrading women. In the N-word. And you just had this class war go off in the Black community with the middle class people going, this is degrading. What are you thinking? What are you doing? And working class people going, we like to beat. I remember my younger brother holding a tape out the car window that my niece was like 9, wanted. It was a rap tape. I think it was Above the Rim. Because he had heard cussing and he had heard sex and he was just like...
That was enough.
So I was driving, he's holding it out the window and threatening to throw it in the Mississippi River. Because how can you listen to that? And it was my mom piping up from the back seat. And she said, Andrew, they don't listen to the words. And that's the same thing, you know, my daughter hates it when I listen to her music because I listen to the lyrics.
Right.
And like, what did they just say? She's like, Mom, we just want the beat.
Well, it's interesting to me because so when gangster rap, that whole piece got really popular, when Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg first got popular, like I did not like it at all because of the things you're talking about, the language that was being used, the way people were being demeaned, just the violent aspect of it. But I also can attribute that part of that I cannot relate to anything they're talking about, culturally speaking. I wasn't raised in an environment where they experienced some of the things that they experienced that they rap about in those songs. Whether or not they actually experienced it, I'm not trying to say that. More, my point is like, you know, even now listening to Kendrick Lamar's Damn album, which is a great album, but like there are dynamics at play there that I don't understand because I didn't grow up in his neighborhood and I didn't grow up around the people that he grew up around, and so. That was where I recognized that looking back. And there's a part of me, I never really paid attention, real deep attention to that music because of that back then, because of the language and the demeaning nature of the lyrics and stuff. But there's a part of me that wants to go back and revisit to see what I missed of what they were trying to say. But the problem is, for me, is just like, you know, when grunge music got popular, you know, Nirvana broke it open for everybody. But there were a few bands that were already playing, you know, similar styles of music at that time, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam. But then you had a whole new generation of copycats that came out because it was popular. And so there's this part of me that wants to celebrate what is authentic about that music from 1992, 1993, when gangster rap got popular. Like, there's something about that that's pure in a artistic expression kind of, and just communication way of thinking about it. But then what I get more bothered about is when it becomes popular and mainstream and people just do it because it's what people want to hear. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It's a stereotype and it's a formula.
Yeah.
For my husband, I wish Ben was here. Because
me too, because I like Ben.
Well, yeah, I know you like Ben. You like hanging out with Ben. And Frank's going to take Ben out someday to a bar and they'll both get drunk and talk smack about me or something. But he said that was the West Coast. Because it was celebrating LA because the Super Bowl was in LA. And those artists were the West Coast artists of that time.
Yeah.
And for Ben and his generation, NWA was really South Central. And they were talking about things that were in South Central. The songs the radio chose to play were the ones that glorified gangbanging. But there were songs that did not glorify gangbanging. I'm thinking Gangster's Paradise, which you know, was about being killed. I'm thinking Mama. There's a number that weren't.
Yeah.
They broke through anyway. But they never got the attention that, say, Gin and Juice. They never got the attention that It Was a Good Day got from the white community. But in the Black community, for that generation. And my nostalgia was for the songs that were not the gangbanging songs. And again, you had this class war going on, just like South Central is not a whole bunch, it's not Beirut. You know, there's a couple of blocks that will be very middle class, and then you'll have a block where there are rundown apartments. And it's like where I grew up on a middle class block, but at the end of our block was the projects. So there's a lot more class mixture than we think about. It wasn't as class segregated.
Yeah.
And for me, my ambivalence is that music represents some of the lower class and working class kids who thought my aspiration for integration was, you know?
Yeah, I see. I understand that, but I also think that part of it was also, you know, finding a way out of your situation, because you know, I think we have to understand that composers and musicians they're creating music in the time and space that they're living in, right? So like for them, they were living in that time and space, and for those artists. For some artists, you know, the way to get out of the community, out of what they were going through, was through this gang culture, this idea of, you know, selling things to make money to get out of what they were going through, but then also to rap about it and to sing about it. I'm only saying that there's space to honor that, what they were going through, but also, do we need to still glorify that?
No, I hear what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm a fan of all those artists. I am a huge fan of everyone. But you know, I think it's important to realize that they were writing at a time that they were going through and commenting on what was happening in their worldview at the time.
Well, at that time too, hold on one second.
Sure.
We went through this time, and I remember it very well, from 1988 to about 1998, where they were taking music out the public schools. And it'd been the public schools where people learned to play the instruments, where people had the vocal music. And music had always been a way out.
Right.
But without that, all of a sudden, and the price of synthesizers, the price of what you use to make rap came down. So in some ways, rap and the emergence of rap, 79 through, was in response to that loss of formal music education. You have to wonder, what would Kendrick Lamar have been if they were still teaching music for free, if you could rent your instrument through the school for $10 a year for free, because that's what I had. But my daughter, if my daughter wants music, I have to jack between $140 to $200. And if I want her to do well, I need to have paid for private lessons. You didn't have to do that in the 70s. You didn't have to do that in the 80s. But right about that 86 to 88 time period, that's when poor people got pushed out, and you began to see rap emerge as the mainstream music.
Yeah, but also, I think it was also a way to cultivate and create something that was new, that was authentic to the experience. Because you think about, as you're talking about formal music lessons, you're speaking really about Western music notation, Western music ideals, right? Which is, you know, not authentic to what America is. But this idea of creating something that's genuinely and truly American, that is grassroots from what my experience is what kind of how rap developed. And so it was like this kind of, I'm anti everything that's this formalized education, but I'm going to create something that's genuine and new to me and to my experience. So it's a kind of grassroots idea of creative music making.
Well, we had always done the dozens.
Yeah, we had always done the dozens.
We've always had ham bone.
Right.
We have always chanted over a beat. And we've always had that call and response. The MC is the call and response. For my generation, it was very spontaneous. If you had a birthday party, these guys would show up. And they'd have their records in a milk crate, and they'd have the tuned turntables and the microphone.
Yes.
And everybody would pass the hat and pay them. Now, that might have been New Orleans area doing that, because we pay musicians. But, okay, that wasn't a smack at some people.
What you trying to say?
we pay musicians. But they would just show up because it was our music.
Right.
It was our music. But I also still remember the formal music educators saying, that's not really
That, right. Right. Yes.
And there's still that, but again, that's a class split. And that's a generational split. For my kids, Wu-Tang forever. Their parents are not going to look at them and say, that's not real music.
Right.
But my kids are much more omnivorous than I was. In my generation, I think there was more racial policing of the lines of music.
I think it's more class and not. I think it's more class and less generational. I think that in any generation, you can find that there was certain music that was deemed acceptable and certain music that was deemed not acceptable for that generation. I mean, even in the Black culture, especially, growing up in the 70s and 80s, everything that was sacred and it was church music, that was acceptable. But anything that was not church was deemed the devil's music and it was not acceptable. So that includes rap and R&B and jazz and hip hop, right? Those are all deemed as things that you shouldn't do.
Until Kirk Franklin.
Until Kirk Franklin, right? And then even before that, right? Even Thomas Dorsey, the fusion of jazz and R&B into gospel music, that fusion that happens with Thomas Dorsey and Mahalia Jackson, then, people wrestle with that, but then they begin to understand that really develops into what is now gospel. But I think it's more, I don't think it's generational, I think it's more class, right? The class splits.
Christian rap started to evolve in the mid 80s as well. It was not very good.
Let us agree on that. Let us agree on that.
So I went through a phase where I was only listening to music I could buy from my Christian bookstore when I was a teenager. And I loved rap, and I liked to rap. Like, I would write my own stuff. So I remember when Preachers in Disguise came out, and they were the first rap group that I could buy from my bookstore that actually sounded somewhat decent. But yeah, so as you were talking about, and then I wonder, how does that fit in? And then you have, now, a lot of the rappers that, many, I would say the best examples are Kendrick Lamar and Chance the Rapper, both have, real spiritual undertones to a lot of their lyrics now. But, I'm not as much Chance, but certainly Kendrick still uses a lot of the gangster experience kind of lingo and terminology and stuff. So how does that fit within this conversation?
Well, I think some of that real emergence with gangster rap and the archetypes, the stereotypical archetype of the coon, that was meant to be for whites to see this music as an escape. And that was marketing towards whites. And you look at Lupe Fiasco's, I can't say the name of the song because of FCC. Oh, can I say the name of the song?
You can say whatever
There's
you want
no
to say.
children listening, right? The song Bad Bitch, where he is interrogating the Jezebel and the coon and the Sambo stereotype. And in the back of the video, as there's a gangster rapper with grills, behind him is a dancing Sambo from the minstrel era. I look at the Roots, what they do, sending up the archetypes of and again, linking it to minstrelsy. There's so many of these sort of mid-range rappers, and if you're really into rap, you know about them, who have been willing to interrogate that. But you don't hear it on the radio, in part because, again, hip-hop beyond beats and rhymes, I want to say, who was it? It wasn't Run, it was a different one saying, anything that scans over 600,000, the black market is 600,000. That's going to be the urban market. Anything above that is suburban whites. So if they're going platinum, double platinum, triple platinum, that's all suburban whites. And that's who a lot of that music is aimed at. And then they interviewed some of the white fans, and they were saying it was an escape, or they thought they were looking at they were like anthropological, or this was the vision of what they thought black people were.
kind of
So the
glorifying it,
problem-
right? It kind of, I'm going to look at it from the outside and just kind of.
So my big question is, one, why is it that the only thing that can be marketed makes us look like that?
Right.
And my second big question is, for white kids today, they're familiar with a lot of black music. But I remember very explicitly when I was growing up, they did not play black music. We had separate black radio stations. Now they call them urban, but it was a separate black radio station. And if you went to a school dance, if you went to a club or something like that, unless you were going to a black club, all you'd hear is pop.
Yeah.
From Bee Gees to Fleetwood Mac. And, I like Fleetwood Mac. I like some of that music, but our music was segregated out. It's been amazing to me to see how many white people are appreciating this music. Because when I was growing up, it was all, put that black music down and you better not be listening to that in front of the white people and all of that. It was really, it was a different experience.
Yeah, I love your comment about, it's marketed towards white people and they appreciate it. And my question is, like, are they appreciating it, or is it like this kind of, I'm gonna like glorify it and look into like this mystical black experience? Like,
Yes.
I'm going to
live vicariously through it.
you, right? Oh, this is like the gangster rap, And so this kind of like I'm yearning for this exotic, this experience of blackness, right? Because even thinking about the Fitzjubilee singers, who when they first started, they were trained classical singers who went out and toured and really made the spiritual popular. But when they first went out, they were singing classical music. And it was not until they got out on the road to these different audiences, these white audiences, who wanted to hear the old slave songs, the old Negro spiritual. They wanted to hear that. They wanted to reminisce of the old days, right? The old days of slavery. I wanted to hear that slave music again. And then once they started singing that and bringing that into classical repertoire, making that popular, then we have the birth of the Negro spiritual, as a concert piece that people sing. But it was because people yearned for this. I want to relive that.
Make America great again.
I want to relive that again, right? I want to enjoy that. I want to feel good to hear that old Negro, that old slave song again. So it's the same. I think it's similar to the same thing you're saying now, where rap is made and is so many white people buy it. Well, yeah, I want to relive. I want to feel what it's like to be in this space here, right?
Can I provide a more innocent perspective, perhaps?
Yeah.
And y'all can tell me if it's not innocent and call me on it. But so I went to, in junior high, in my first year of high school, I was in a school that was very integrated. I always said it was 50-50 black and white, but I'm sure it wasn't that. It was probably less blacks than 50%. But still, at least half of my friends were black people. And I had a few dudes that I hung around with that we would rap together every once in a while and stuff. And so I'll say my draw to rap in the first place was Run DMC playing with Aerosmith doing Walk This Way. Mm-hmm. That's how I got introduced to rap music. Very first rap song I ever got into. I had the 45 record. I had the tape,
And who was it who did Mary, Mary, Why You Buggin'? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't know.
But that was another one of those white and black combinations.
Yeah. But that one was the one that drew me in because at that time I was interested in a little bit edgier rock. Mm-hmm. And it was just a cool combination to me to bring rap, that rap sound in with that. So then once I started listening to Run DMC, the Raising Hell album, I was in. And then I got Houdini and I got,
Beastie Boys.
Yes, Beastie Boys. And so for me, my entrance into rap music in general came a lot because of my friends, but also because of that breakthrough with the Run DMC Aerosmith song. So when gangster rap really took hold, for me, that was very foreign to how I had understood the black experience in America, because I had never seen anything like what they were talking about. Most of the friends I had at my school were middle class, lower middle class, maybe. Mm-hmm. And we had our share of poor folks in that school too, but the whole gang thing was not something that we experienced there. And so, I mean, there was racism and there were racially charged events, like, you know, you get to the Greek Fest in Virginia Beach, you know, a little later on. But so for me, when I listened to Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre and all these folks, NWA, and I listened to some of the things, like, to me, that doesn't sound real. Because the black folks that I knew didn't live that way, certainly didn't talk that way.
But you knew enough black folks to know that.
Right.
Come to Eau Claire.
Right.
You know, go to Upper Arlington, Ohio. You know, go to Beaver Creek or someplace in Michigan or someplace like that. For them, this is the stereotype that they have of us. And because, you know, I think of Arrested Development in Tennessee, and that's really the rural experience. I think of The Roots. They weren't marketed in the same way. And to know about Arrested Development, to know about Houdini and that sort of sets you as a connoisseur, or you had black friends, you were somebody who was crossing the color line already. But you have a whole set of whites who never crossed the color line. I still remember...
And their experience of black culture is through that music.
Through this music.
Right.
And it confirms their assumptions.
Right.
Which is why it's comfortable. And it comes back to those ideas of comfort and contempt.
Right.
So they can be comfortable, but they can also be contemptuous, and they can also feel superior.
That's what comes back to the NFL. I mean, it's like they're comfortable seeing this on display. They're not comfortable with anyone challenging that notion of blackness and of black music.
Yeah,
that was comfortable to see those artists on stage. And those artists and I love those artists. Don't get me wrong, I love those artists, but it was comfortable to see that. And it was not challenging what the NFL is currently battling with.
Well, part of it too is they were defamed.
They were. Greatly.
And they were not people who were going to challenge the status quo. Because the Kendrick Lamar songs that they chose were not the ones that really pushed the status quo. They were very commercial artists. They're very much commercial rap. And I think that and to a certain extent, Kanye West, because he's growing up again, but he's manipulating the system, they confirm the worst fears.
You said Kanye West, and there was a collective groan from everybody in the vicinity.
Yeah, and I'm about to get into this.
Complicated.
Oh my God. Well, that's a nice way to put it. I was going to say interesting. But he manipulates the system. He really manipulates the system. And he goes where the money is. And these were not artists who are going to question your belief in whether or not corporations have too much money. These are not artists who are going to shake your ideas up about the racial status quo.
Yeah.
This is not Tracy Chapman. These were commercial artists. You get up, you shake your booty, you sit back down.
Yeah.
So that's easy for them to do.
Eminem did take a knee, though. Eminem did take a knee.
Yeah, but did he take a knee for Kaepernick or because Dre was playing the piano?
Who knows?
And no one knows.
Maybe he was praying. I don't know.
But I mean, because of it was ambiguous. It was very ambiguous. And I mean, I like Eminem more than the only other artist I'd say who had the authenticity of Eminem was Snow. I don't know if you remember him.
I don't remember Snow.
He was a white Jamaican drug dealer.
Okay.
And he had a rap.
He had a record called 12 Inches of Snow.
Yeah. See, you remember that. I keep forgetting that. You and I are closer in generation. Frank's the younger one.
I just remembered the title of that album.
As opposed to Ice Ice Baby, which is like, oh my God. I got here and everybody thought that was rap and I was going to die. But, the rap that we see on the radio does not challenge our expectations. Self-destruction, some of the other stuff.
Yeah,
I think
that's
Lawrence
a good
Hill,
point.
all of those
A great
would have
example.
challenged our expectations.
Yeah.
Well, a great example of that, Childish Gambino's "This Is America," and,
Right.
and the video with
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
like super poignant.
Right.
And that we played that on Converge Radio, on regular rotation
Right.
because it was great. It was a great piece of art and compelling, and also had the kind of message we want to share with Converge. I don't listen to a lot of commercial radio, but I don't necessarily remember ever hearing it on the radio.
It got a little bit of radio play, but it didn't get a lot. Although he got a Grammy for that album.
He got a lot of play on the internet, like a lot of views
of it
of
was
video,
internet.
things of that sort, and social media for sure.
And he, I think that he's one of those who broke through despite instead
Sure.
of because he's going around the record companies. I look at Gary Clark Jr.'s This Is This Land. And that has this huge video. They're burning Confederate flags. It's about Black people going back to the South and buying land and reclaiming roots. No radio play here in Eau Claire.
Right.
I'm introducing it to my students. He gets a Grammy. How does he get the Grammy? It's through Spotify, it's through iTunes. And Spotify and iTunes for artists are really, problematic. They don't pay them.
They don't.
When we're talking about point and then you have 4 zeros and a 4 in front of it, of a penny, they're not getting paid. But it is breaking through, and all of these artists have their own channels and people are finding them directly. But that's also Black music, but nobody thinks of it as Black music. Or Tracy Chapman, because we now have this stereotype of gangster rap as the Black music. And I've had students here get very upset because white students will come up to them and assume that they listen to rap, or assume they're from the inner city, or assume they're poor. There was a period from, I want to say 2001 to 2008, and I need David Sprick here to remind me of exactly the years, where the police came to me and said, could you please do something in your classes to tell the white boys not to go up to Black men in the bars and say, yo, what's up, my...
Oh my gosh.
Because they were swinging. And that's when
As they should.
I
Put that out there.
Yeah, that feels appropriate.
Sounds right to me. That's what I would do.
Yeah, but
you know what, though?
Wisconsin doesn't have a fighting words doctrine.
This is a great illustration of the point you were talking about, though. Like, for me, it would never have occurred to me to do that. Because the Black folks that I grew up with didn't talk to each other like that. And certainly white people didn't use that word unless they meant to degrade somebody. And so, like, if your only image of Black culture is what you've heard in certain kinds of music, then that might feel appropriate to you.
And they do. And we had to have the whole fight where...
I'm saying there's a pathway of weird mental gymnastics that might take you to a place that make you think that's okay to do.
Yeah, I challenge that. I don't think so. I think we're in a day and age where people know and people understand what words are trigger words for anyone, and I think people know that word is a trigger word for many Black people.
I think this was 20 years ago that she's talking about, though.
I still think 20 years ago, though, people knew that as well.
I think that there was, that whole thing with edgelords who want to be edgy and mess with people and see what they can get away with.
Right. I think
it links to that.
It was a point of I'm gonna see what I can get away with and see what I can do, and I feel like I have the right and the privilege to say this.
Well, on top of that, though, I was doing we were doing the Center for Teaching American History here. We had those grants. So we were running classes of teachers from all over western and eastern Wisconsin. And one of the things that the teachers were talking about was you were beginning to see that proliferation of Confederate flags. But that the students using the N-word, some of them thought that was the way Black kids talked to each other, but a large number of them thought they were being edgy, or because there were only, biracial black people around them, they had been given the black pass. Well, I say the N-word around my one friend, so I can say it with everyone. So I wound up having to do a lot of explaining black pass is not transferable. But also, you have to understand that. You get a black pass from one person. That doesn't mean, don't do it to me.
Right.
I am the one who will hit you. But the other one is that when these kids are in these only situations up here north, they can be scared. And you're throwing the N-word and they're surrounded by 20 white kids and they're not sure who's going to help them. So they're allowing you the black pass because they're intimidated, because they're scared, and because they're not going to say anything about it to protect their masculinity. Now, I know my son, he's been raised in a house with 2 middle-class black parents, and it's like nobody calls you the N-word.
Right.
But he faced it when he was on swim team, and my understanding is several young men wound up head first in the swim team pool. But Clay had a set of white friends around him who would help him. What happens to these kids who it's everyone around them?
Right.
So, and I think that's kind of what was happening with the football players too. There's a set of kids who've been bullying and getting passes from onlys. And when they ran into a set of black men who were ready to stand up and say, no, you don't say that to us, they really didn't know how to react. They weren't used to that kind of boundary.
Go ahead now.
I see Frank about to say something. Go ahead, Frank.
I'm just thinking. I agree with you that maybe there were some that.
That's what the teachers were telling.
Said that they were bullied and they felt the need to let that pass. I tend to think that there were also some that unfortunately let it go and let it slide and did not have the wherewithal to set boundaries for themselves. Whether they were bullied or scared or whatever, or just let it pass. That is the unfortunate thing, because it should not pass for anyone.
No, it shouldn't pass for anyone. But you have to take, if you are the only black in a hyper white situation,
Which I have been.
Which you have been.
I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. So as Omaha, Nebraska is not hugely black. Especially when I was growing up, 30 some odd years ago.
We're not going to talk about how long ago.
And I did not experience that in my mostly all white high school. I was one of, I can count 10 black students that graduated in my class. So I've definitely been in that situation, and fortunately have never experienced that situation. And I think that, that's what I was talking about, the N-word and things of that sort. And even 30 years ago, I think people knew that was not something you did. I think we give pause and give space for them to say, they grew up around black people, so they think it's okay. No, it's never okay. And unfortunately, whoever was around them who allowed that to happen, that was the problem there.
Well, that's why I keep telling them it's not transferable.
Right, it's not transferable whatsoever.
I don't care what this other person said.
Yeah.
I'm a whole different black person.
Right.
And just because Miley Cyrus or somebody else does something, does that mean you're going to allow it?
Gosh.
Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Yeah. But that is the excuse that I was given. I didn't say I believe it. That's what
I believe you. I believe you. And because even that just frustrates me.
Well, the one time they used it when I was in high school at Upper Arlington, 2,000 students, 10 black kids all together. So I went from a segregated all-black high school my freshman year, 35, to Upper Arlington. And you want to talk about a culture shock. Mm-hmm. The one time some kids in my debate class used the N-word, I busted a ruler over the boy's head. Now that may have been gender privilege.
Is there
women?
Is there videotape footage of this? Because I really want to see it.
It was 1983. Okay, it was 1983. But the teachers protected me because it was Mr. Donovan who was in the room when it happened. It wasn't the debate teacher. And when the kids started to say something, it's like, you shouldn't have said it. But Mr. Donovan was in my mother's Ed PhD class too. Wow. And we kept waiting for the parents to complain. They never complained because who was going to admit their kid was the one who called me the other word? Mm-hmm. And that kid wound up. And he kept trying to be ingratiating and he was edgelord. Yeah. He thought he was being ironic. It's like, I don't believe ironic. I will hit you with this ruler again. No.
Yeah.
But that is class again.
Right.
Because there are spaces that are working class where you do hear the N-word thrown a lot. Yes. But it isn't generally thrown in front of white people. That's a behind the scenes, lower working class phenomena. And you still have a whole set of black people who are looking at the ones who want to retain the right to do it and saying, look, y'all confusing white people. We're the ones paying the price. Y'all need to stop. And we don't need to call ourselves that. We are not. Richard Pryor in Liberia saying, that is not what we are. Because the N-word is the coon.
Right.
He had been in Liberia for what, 3 weeks? I haven't seen nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is,
that's what he said.
These are kings and queens of Africa. And you notice every comedian who makes a career out of the N-word hits 40, has kids, and all of a sudden repudiates it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking about, Solange Knowles' album, A Seat at the Table, 2016. I think it was A Seat at the Table. She had a song on there, FUBU. Yeah. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that song. Where the chorus is all my ends in the whole wide world. And but that song, for me, as a listener, as a white man, when I listened to that song, I was immediately uncomfortable because of that word being used over and over again. But then I was listening to what she's really communicating. Yeah. And it became a very meaningful song for me and became my favorite song on that album.
But I think of Phyllis Cressley. I lost her last name. She's the one who wrote the ISIS Papers. Mm-hmm. And she has this quote, they make you sing and dance your degradation. They tell you your degradation is empowerment. Yeah. And those who do that can make you kill yourself without knowing why. And I can send you the meme. There's a meme with it, but it's a very famous quote from her. I think of what she did, and I think of Beyonce using the term bottom bitch. And the bottom is the prostitute who keeps the other prostitutes in line for the pimp. Mm. The bottom would be the sellout. The bottom would be the collaborator. And yet she's being glorified. She sings that she is the bad bitch and the bottom bitch, which is the same one. So we have this music that actually does in some way, depending on whose hands it is in, will glorify degradation or can uplift and inspire. Because at the same time that I look at Beyonce singing that, I look at Lauryn Hill mm-hmm. and Kendrick Lamar's Pray For Me. I mean, that is, I think, the warrior song of a lot of the local Summer of George Floyd leaders, where we were out there, we weren't sure what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's something that isn't a mainstream knowledge, but that song is heavily influential. Or Lean On Me became the song for BLM in the Summer of George Floyd. So the several rappers, and I mean Kanye West on Jesus Walks says if he doesn't use the N-word, they won't put his song on the radio. If they don't do this, they won't put their song on the radio.
So that's one. So there's the element of selling out using that language or whatever to make sure you're going to sell some records, versus when it's used as like, this is just the way I talk, this is my experience, this is how I'm going to say it. Those are two different dynamics.
Yes.
And I really struggle. There was a time for me where I'm like, I don't want to really listen to anything where the artist is saying the N-word. Because for me, that had always been negative. Because I only heard it in a negative sense when I heard it growing up. And I heard it from family members, in a negative sense, degrading sense. And so, but then I have, in the last few years, like I've asked certain people, like, so what do you think? And I've gotten pointed to Dick Gregory a couple times, and then this idea of, taking ownership of that word and making it something that something more dignified. This is us. We're reclaiming this word. And I don't honestly know like how I should think and feel about. I'm not going to use the word. I can tell you that, but I want to appreciate, like when I hear it in a song like that Solange song. Like, how should I feel about that? Like, when I'm listening to her use that word, referring to her people, like in a connective way, not in a degrading way. She's not intending it to be degrading.
But she's middle-class church-going, so is that really her language?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
From Houston.
She's from Houston. Yeah, and it's like, and Black people are not a monolith, so everyone has different thoughts and feelings and emotions about that word. Yeah. I think that, first of all, I think we all know. We can all self-censor. I mean, you've probably listened to music in front of your mom or grandma, and you know when certain words are coming up that you just don't say out loud. You can self-censor. You know the N word's coming up. You just don't need to say it, right? We're not. We're shy about that. We know how to self-censor. And I also think that, as you mentioned with Solange, how should you feel about her saying it? That's a question for Solange. How is she interpreting that? What was her intent behind the meaning of the word, behind the use of the word? And also, it's up to the listener how they interpret that. Yes, there's this whole push about let's reclaim it and let's use it in a uplifting, glorifying way. It's a degrading word. So I'm not sure how you uplift that word. It's the degrading word overall, right?
I don't think you can reclaim it.
I don't think you can. Is it culturally, has it been used culturally yes, of course. I mean, you can, go into any conversation within a group of people who use that word and it's not a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. But that's a word that's reserved and used in a culture, in a space with people who are part of the culture in that space. Right? It's not transferable, and it's things of that sort. So
yeah, right.
It's hard, I think, for me because I have only really encountered that word socially when it's been a threat. Mm-hmm. I'm teaching Emmett Till right now. I have students watching the videos. We watched the PBS interviews with his family, one of the last ones with Mamie Till, and they're going through newspaper archive and seeing the articles. And people using the N-word in AP articles. Mm-hmm. So it has a historical context for me, but it's also a class marker. And maybe that's the respectability in me. Mm-hmm. But I was raised in the generation that integrated the schools, that integrated, or at least tried to. And we were always taught you have to hold yourself with dignity. You don't degrade yourself. The weight of the race is on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And, I have a very bad relationship with that word. There's context where it's appropriate. I mean, Gary Clark is quoting in his song, there's a line where they're going, nigger run, and he's saying, no, I'm not going to anymore.
Right.
But I think about a couple of years ago where I was crossing Water Street and somebody yelled the word out of a car at me. One of the reasons I stopped running, down County E back behind my house was a car with a carload of teenagers yelled the word out at me. So context matters, I think. A teacher using it in a classroom, talking about literature is one thing. I don't think that person should be ran out of the profession. But they should ask themselves, do I need to use this word?
Right.
A politician using it casually in the backspace, that to me is telling. That's a tell that this is how this person thinks of people who look like me, and I don't want them in power.
Yeah.
And if they're saying I'm just joking, that's even worse, because that's how you casually think about me, and joking is how people tell the truth. Joking is a window into the soul.
I think it's important to note you were talking about the AP articles regarding Emmett Till and that word being used there. It wasn't that long ago, right here in Eau Claire, that you could read that word in the newspaper describing a guy they called N-word Dick. That was his name.
Yeah.
And that was early 1900s.
Yep.
Not that long ago. So that's not just something that is like deep down south. That's here. It lived here. It still lives here.
It still lives here. And my daughter has had to tell people, don't call me the N-word.
Yeah. My son's been called the N-word. Yep.
My son has had to deal with it because he's been in these hyper-white spaces. My husband has made it very clear you don't call him the N-word.
And knowing what I know about his martial arts background,
smart people don't ask it. Yeah, smart people don't do that. But the thing is, you can't, the reason why I feel you can't reclaim the word is the word's a threat. So to start to use it yourself merely clouds the issue.
Yeah.
It's kind of like there's some people who think we've reclaimed the B word, yet if a man is screaming that word with me at a certain tone, it's still a threat.
Yeah.
So the context matters.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the context matters. I think we can all agree that there are, if you're part of certain communities, certain groups, they use certain words in that group, and that group is, it's fine. I mean, I've seen women in a group that use the B word together. I've seen people of LGBTQ community use different words within that group as well. But it's not like because we use it that you can also use it. Like you said, it's context, right? And it's important to realize that. And again, everyone can self-censor. We all do it every single day. You don't talk to your boss the way you talk to your friend or your family. We know how to self-censor. So that excuse like, oh, well, they use it, so I can too. That's not an excuse.
Well, the edgelords are annoying because what they want to do is punch down. For one of them to call me Negro, please, is a problem because of the historical connotations. Now, if I turn around and said, Negro, please, to Ed, that would be hilarious.
I would laugh so hard. I would be shocked, and then I would laugh really hard.
But that's because I've just shifted the frame.
Right.
I've shifted the frame. I mean, it's kind of like if one of my male colleagues got on my nerves and I said, B word, please, he would probably lose it.
Right.
But that's because the frame is ironic. Yeah. What these people are calling ironic is not ironic, it's just minimizing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like one time, Jerry Madison's going to laugh because he was in the room. And he was in the room with me, David Shee, and Jesse Dixon. And we were talking about the fact that, we wanted his people on Water Street to stop pulling over the black football players disproportionately.
And if anybody who's listening to this doesn't know who those people are, just Google them.
Jerry's the former police chief, and he's a friend of mine. And we were going at it, and I can't remember what was said, but I'm a smart aleck, always. And I looked up and said, well, I just don't feel like being black today. Today I'm white, so you're going to have to listen to me. And Madison paused. Jesse knows me, so Jesse just was, And David, she was shocked. And Madison lost it. He just lost it because, I'm shifting the frame, but I'm also going against, here's a black person declaring herself white. So we have this really good relationship, and I was able to help him with this push towards evidence-based policing. But sometimes you have to understand your context and understand when something is appropriate and when something's not. I'm not going to use the R word or the C word on white people here.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to lead that way.
Yeah.
And it's an insult. Even if some white people are okay and they give me the pass for it, still an insult.
Well, I have to pause us because we are at the end of our time.
Okay.
And we never got to Black History Month.
No, we didn't talk about a singular item that you originally wanted to talk about.
No.
But this was so rich, and like I'm challenged and encouraged, and I love it when we have conversations like that make me walk away feeling that way.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Frank.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be
we'll
here.
We'll have to do this again, and
We
Salika, as
got
always.
to have him back on so he can at least talk about his research.
I would love to.
Yes. You got anything going on next Monday? Yeah, so we'll make that happen. But
Perfect.
yeah, thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.